Back in. Fade. Oh, he's a one-man wrecking crew. Caris LeVert. He's not human. Vucevic goes to attack mode. Then at the apex, it's a summit swat for Jarrett Allen.
Last night it was the NBA suspending its season after Rudy Gobert of the Utah Jazz tested positive for the coronavirus.
This hiatus will be at least 30 days.
The NBA Board of Governors has approved a 22-team restart in Orlando, Florida at Disney World.
One team that's fighting for some seeding in the Eastern Conference, we're not even going to recognize it because right now there are 7 players on the Nets that will not even be coming.
Listen, guys, because there's no home court advantage, Brooklyn will advance to the second round. You heard it here first.
Okay, big fella. Okay.
What?
Yep.
Welcome to the Hang Time Podcast. I'm your host, Sekou Smith, here in Atlanta. We are continuing our ongoing series looking at all 22 teams involved in the NBA restart in Orlando, starting July 30th, of course. And today we're talking Brooklyn Nets with my main man, former Hang Time Podcast co-host John Schumann, an expert on all things, certainly about the NBA, but specifically about the Nets. They're obviously showing up to the competition in Orlando shorthanded. And I don't just mean Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, who they didn't have for much of the season prior to the shutdown. But who are these guys? Like, who are these guys in Nets uniforms that people are going to be watching in Orlando?
I think Caris LeVert, Joe Harris, and Jarrett Allen will be the most familiar faces that they'll see. Then you got Garrett Temple, I think, is still healthy and on the active roster. Beyond that, it'll be makeshift. I think they're really thin up front beyond Jarrett Allen. I assume that Rodions Kurucs is the sort of the default starting power forward. It'll be interesting. They're going to be small. They're going to play small. But I think you just put the focus on those first 3 guys, because I think what the Nets do in Orlando isn't matter much. Obviously, this team is about Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, and so this has sort of been and has been basically all season a season of waiting for those 2 guys to be healthy. But I think there are questions going forward for the offseason, as brief as it may be, regarding the supporting cast, like that next tier of players on the Nets beyond Durant and Irving. And that starts with their sort of core 4 guys that have been around, the sort of Kenny Atkinson group of LeVert, Harris, Allen, and then Spencer Dinwiddie, who isn't there. And like, which of those 4 guys are coming back? Which of those 4 guys can complement Irving and Durant? Which of those 4 guys may be shopped in order to find somebody else? Interestingly, like, Joe Harris is the one that is the obvious complement to Irving and Durant because he's one of the best shooters in the league, but he's the free agent of the group. And then the other 3, are under contract. Allen, you would think, just sticks around because he's an important one of the group. And even though, DeAndre Jordan was moved into the starting lineup after Kenny Atkinson was fired, I think Allen is obviously the future, the center of the future. Mm-hmm. But maybe he's a piece that needs to go in a trade if they're trying to upgrade on the wing. So I think it's a fascinating question. I guess LeVert will have the sort of microscope on him in however many games they have. He's tantalizing, but mostly a rough career so far. As much as you and I want to see that guy succeed, because he went to Michigan, because he's related to Eddie and Gerald. Rest in peace. I mean, he was their best player in last year's postseason against the Sixers. He had a great start to that last season, the 2018-19 season, had that nasty injury, had a solid start to this season, then had another injury even earlier in the season, and then finished strong once he was moved into the starting lineup in early February. But, he's never had sustained success. And I don't know if he or Dinwiddie complements Irving and Durant very well. It's always good to have as many guys who can do things off the dribble as possible. The Celtics have found success with that this season. The Jazz have one of the most improved offenses in the league this season because they have multiple guys who can do stuff off the dribble. But Dinwiddie and LeVert are guys that need the ball in their hands, and they're guys that aren't necessarily catch and shoot complementary players in that role.
I mean, if you're a team like the Nets, and we're forecasting for them beyond the Orlando bubble, obviously, don't you need a third guy, a number 3 guy like Dinwiddie or LeVert? Like, wouldn't you need one of those guys in the event that Kyrie or Durant is down, and you've got to rely on that third guy? It's not Jared Allen. He's not going to be a guy who can be a volume scorer or, give you the kind of production that either one of those guys, Dinwiddie or LeVert, will give you offensively. I mean, just if you're plotting the future for the Nets, wouldn't you need one of those guys as your third guy?
Yes, but you want a third guy who's more of a hybrid, a guy who can play off the catch and who can, create his own shot. So those guys can create their own shots, but those are 2 guys that are best just getting to the bucket. Check this. LeVert on catch and shoot 3-pointers the last 2 seasons has shot 30% on catch and shoot threes. That's brutal. Like, that is not something you want to put alongside like Irving and Durant. Dinwiddie's a little bit better, but he has not shot well from outside the paint. So you would want a guy who can, one, shoot off the catch, and maybe those 2 guys can develop in that sense in the next few months. But I think that's a big question for me, is those 2 guys are really good at getting to the basket and aren't necessarily complementary players on the floor. With a lot of teams, you see the value in having multiple ball handlers on the floor at the same time. One pick and roll doesn't go anywhere. You pitch the ball to the second side and you run another one. And that has value.
I would argue, just in defense of LeVert and Dinwiddie as well, they might be better catch and shoot players when Kyrie and KD are on the floor, as opposed to the dudes. And this is no offense to the guys they played with the last couple years, but I'm saying maybe they're better when the guy they're playing off of is an all-time great Hall of Famer, as opposed to each playing off of each other as the main option or someone else. And
that's a valid point.
That's just forecast. I mean, we're forecasting, of course. A bigger question for me, John, about the Nets. Who and what are they now? I mean, before Kyrie and Kevin Durant came in free agency and Kenny Atkinson had developed a certain kind of culture for the group they had, everybody was praising the job Sean Marks was doing, in terms of crafting something from what they were prior to his arrival. Now, I'm not sure. I mean, I understood the attitude, kind of the personality of what a Kenny Atkinson coach team was supposed to look like. Now I have no idea. I don't know what their personality as a group will be. Will they take on KD's persona and aura? Will they be a Kyrie-led team? As many questions about the supporting cast, I have questions about KD and Kyrie as the 2 centerpieces on the same team. We've seen them against each other, obviously, at the highest level. But what will they look like with those 2 guys as their centerpieces?
It's a valid question. I think it's a total reset, basically, at the start of next season. I think, whereas the culture drivers were Marks and Atkinson before, the culture drivers are now Durant and Irving. And I think that's part of the reason why Atkinson is no longer there. I don't know how Jacques Vaughn sort of makes his case for the job, in that he's only had 2 games to coach so far. He's going to have a maximum of 13, I guess, if they can steal a playoff game in Orlando. But even then, Durant and Irving aren't even there. It's not like they're playing. They're not playing, and they're in the locker room and in the meeting room. They're not even in Orlando. And those are the 2 guys that matter when it comes to choosing the next coach, whether it be Jacques Vaughn or somebody else. So I don't know how they make that decision based on anything that happens in the next month.
I did disrespect some of the other guys who are going to be wearing Nets uniforms in Orlando. I didn't mean to do that. Obviously, Jamal Crawford is one of my favorite guys of all time, and I'm looking forward to seeing him back in the league. What kind of showcase is this for guys like that, guys who've been out of the league or on the fringes? Because we've never been in a situation where the entire league, teams, coaches whatever, will be concentrated. And this is different than Summer League because that's when it's the future and young guys and developmental guys but this is when the eyes of the entire league will be on what's going on in the bubble, maybe who can still, get it done at a high level, who can't. What kind of opportunity do you think this is for Jamal, who haven't been seen on this stage in a while?
Yeah, I mean, Tyler Johnson is another one that they added who I believe got waived by the Suns this year because he was basically terrible for the Suns. I guess they're all, basically auditioning for jobs next year, whether it would be with Brooklyn or somebody else. And Crawford, it's a showcase. He's going to get a chance, I think, although where the Nets have some depth is in the backcourt. So it'll be, even with Dinwiddie out and Irving out, they still have LeVert, Garrett Temple, Joe Harris, Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot, Chris Chiozza, who had some moments for them before the season was suspended.
Yeah, it's a motley crew for the Nets in Orlando. Nobody would dispute that. To me, it's an opportunity, if nothing else, for some of those guys to show out. You got nothing to lose. They've obviously in a position to hold on to their playoff seed or spot and not lose that in the seeding games they're going to play. You never know. I mean, this is one of those situations where you say, yeah, this is why you show up and play, because somebody inevitably is going to be prepared. Some players, some teams are not. It's a huge opportunity for not only those players, but for, as you mentioned, for Jacque Vaughn, because we don't know what direction the Nets are going in terms of the coaching staff and the roster in a lot of instances. So it's going to be an opportunity for a lot of guys to forge some credibility with Sean Marks and maybe with the front office to see where they might fit potentially down the road. Are you getting the sense that Nets fans have kind of digested the fact that, yeah, we're not only not going with our big dogs, we're going with a group that doesn't allow us to really put too much stock in what takes place in Orlando with this team?
Basically, it's like, all right, let's just see what Caris LeVert can do with the ball in his hands for however much it's going to be in his hands during these 8 to 15 games. Maybe there's some a little bit of a spotlight on Kurucs and Allen just because they're young guys who have still time to develop into rotation pieces. Well, Allen's obviously a rotation piece, but Kurucs there's questions about his ability to play the four and to be a rotation guy for a good team. So I think that's about it. But of course, we have no idea how this whole thing is going to play out, like how much it's going to look like what was, the first 2/3 of this season. Who knows? Like it's going to feel like a totally different season, and not just because the gyms are empty, but because it's been 4 months since these guys last played. Yeah,
there's no question. It's going to be a very unprecedented environment for all these teams, and certainly the Nets as well. We're talking to John Schuhmann here on the Hang Time Podcast about the Brooklyn Nets. We've gloom and doomed them, but when we come back after the break here, we're gonna talk some keys to the Magic Kingdom, play a little fantasy hoops, if we will, with this Nets group and what might be in store for them in the Orlando bubble. Welcome back here on the Hang Time Podcast. Talking with John Schuhmann of NBA.com. We're talking about the Nets and kind of what the keys to their Orlando bubble experience will be at Disney in the Magic Kingdom here. And if we're looking at this group that has made the trip, and you got a genie with 3 wishes, if you can grant them, what would they be for this Nets group in terms of things going the way they want them to in Orlando?
One, I would say Caris LeVert has himself a productive few weeks, and I think it's more than just beyond his ability to get to the basket and finish. I think him as a playmaker will be interesting to see. And then I would say 2, you see some progress from Jared Allen and Kurucs, just as some promise for the future with those 2 guys. The Nets front office sort of keeps things tight-lipped, so we don't know how much they want to sort of upgrade by shopping some of their younger guys.
Mm-hmm.
But if Allen and Karutz do something that intrigues another team around the league, well, then maybe that helps Brooklyn find the upgrade that they want. I guess Bradley Beal is the name that will come to mind first in that regard. And then 3, I guess, avoid the play-in scenario with Washington and actually make it into the playoffs clean. It's tough to see them outlasting Orlando, although they have 2 head-to-head matchups with the Magic. So if they can win both of those, then they can get in as the 7th seed, have a slightly better matchup in the first round, and then maybe win a playoff game.
What regular season tendency did the Nets need to leave at home if they're going to have some sort of success in Orlando?
Their tendency to miss shots. The Nets, here's a stat for you. The Nets are the only team that ranked in the bottom 6 in field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, and free throw percentage. So if they can
Good Lord.
Make some shots, if they can catch fire, then they still have the top 10 defense that they had, then they're in decent shape.
Beauty and the Beast matchups for the Nets. What's the best possible matchup for them when we're talking about the playoff scenarios?
I mean, we're basically talking either Milwaukee or Toronto. So I think best is Toronto. They did get a nice win. The Nets were the team that ended the Raptors, I think it was 15-game winning streak right before the All-Star break. The Brooklyn got a win, and they were competitive with them during that streak. I think just a few days before they ended the Raptors' winning streak, they had a tight game in Toronto that came down to the last possession. So that's obviously a better matchup than Milwaukee. But like I said, who knows? Maybe Toronto. I have a feeling like Toronto could be sort of a team just because of their sort of institutional knowledge and the chemistry that they were able to show right away this season, and the sort of the experience that they had from last year with that core group of 7 guys. I think Toronto could be a team that sort of is able to hit the ground running better than others in this thing. So maybe Toronto is the worst matchup, but Milwaukee's has just been so good, especially defensively, that it's tough to not pick them as the best team in the East.
Who would be Mr. Incredible for this Nets team? And I'm talking about who becomes that X factor and game changer for them in uniform in Orlando.
We've talked about Caris LeVert enough, but he's going to have the ball in his hands like all the time. It's got to go with him. And then beyond that, Jared Allen, if he's able to just be a defensive anchor, then he can keep them in games that way by protecting the rim and forcing teams to shoot from the outside. Maybe that helps in a situation where teams haven't played for 4 months, and therefore outside shooting is a little bit more sketchy than the team's ability to get to the basket.
Who do you think of those Nets players will end up being the rowdiest fan at an opposing team's game?
Does any of these guys have a good friendship with any of their opponents?
I mean, I would imagine, a guy like Jamal Crawford who would be fired up to be there anyway. He would probably be the candidate.
Yeah, he's a hoop head. He loves basketball. Like he's maybe the most passionate hoop head in the league.
Yeah.
So maybe, and then obviously has a lot of great relationships around the league. So that's a good answer.
Tons of connections around the league for Jamal Crawford. I don't know. That's such a young, interesting group of guys. I don't know if they got any golfers in the bunch. Who do you think shows up with golf clubs from the Nets?
Garrett Temple, maybe? Garrett Temple play golf?
I'm sure he does. I'm sure he's a guy that likes to compete like that, and he's older. Those older players, for some reason, they all seem like they got into golf at the same time.
And he's in the MBPA sort of leadership along with like Iguodala and Chris Paul and stuff. So maybe there's a golf sort of camaraderie within that group.
Final question: if there's a fairy tale ending for this Nets team, what do they hope ultimately to get out of this? I'm not crazy enough to think that this is a team that goes Hoosiers on everybody and some top season playoffs. I mean, just realistically, what are they hoping to get out of town with in terms of something they can use as a stone for whatever they're building for the future?
Intrigue regarding their young guys, like where their young guys stand out to the point where, one, they see them as a foundational piece, but maybe two, they see them as, or other teams see them as trade pieces. I'm guessing that this team will go shopping for a third star, quote unquote, and having LeVert or Jarrett Allen stand out in this situation could help them in that regard. On the court, maybe a playoff win early in a series. So like a game 1 or game 2 win where they can, put a little bit of pressure on whatever team they're facing in the first round and make things and give their guys some sort of big game experience.
I mean, obviously they have a little bit of history in terms of, being in those pressure moments. I remember 2 years ago, we were talking about them being the cardiac kids, all the tight games they had, for some good, some bad, in terms of losing leads and making up ground at the end of games and making them exciting at the end. Brooklyn Nets will be an intriguing group to watch in Orlando. Shu, I know you're going to be watching all the games anyway, so I know you'll be breaking it down. We appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule, or at least your busier schedule than it has been during the pandemic, certainly cranking up now. We're talking all 22 teams here on the Hang Time Podcast in the lead up to the Orlando restart of the season, July 30th, in the bubble. John Schumann from NBA.com. I appreciate your time, sir.
All right.